Is Gemara Yevamos Daf Tzadi. So the learning should bring in incredible schoshenim v'shalchaim v'devar mertiva b'asver rachol shalom levi zava v'vedal shem chayv l'midas v'asiyum halkos v'as chus v'yoshem v'yosem v'vedal shmam atil novzin v'chlas chamas yivas ablum asmindol chayim v'yishum v'magov shavim shechan chaloya v'sardina v'soich sha'ar chayli Yisrael. We're holding in the bottom of Tzadi Zayin and Beis. We're 5 lines from the bottom. We're in the middle of a lengthy discussion between Rav Sheshes and Rav Acha bar Yaakov. We'll just go up for a moment. And right when the Gemara began, we had the sheet of Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Excuse me, let's get our highlighting rolling. There we go. We have the sheet of Rav Acha bar Yaakov that says you're allowed to marry each other. And Rav Sheshes, you said that it is forbidden. And what we're discussing over here is the case of Giyaris, as the Mishnah honed in. And the question is, when this woman is Megayer and she has her children that are Megayer, there's different stages as we started seeing yesterday. And the Gemara began with the Machlekes Rav Acha bar Yaakov and Rav Sheshes with regard to whether after Geirus the siblings are allowed to marry each other's wives, etc. So we pick up from there, in which the Gemara says, Tashema, 5 lines from the bottom, Shnei Achim Teumim. We have 2 twin brothers, and of course the fact that they are twins we're going to get back to in a moment. Geirim that are Geirim V'chein Mishuchrarim, or a case where they were avadim, slaves that were freed. Lo choltzim lo miyamim. They're not allowed to do chalitza. They're not allowed to do yibum. Of course, for the simple reason that it's not considered that they're related to each other to allow them to marry their brother's wife in the event of death, like a yibum or chalitza requires. But on the same token, they're, number one, they don't do chalitza yibum, but there's also no iser to be together with the Isha's Ach. There's no Isser for violating one's brother's wife. And number 3, that's case A of the Brisa. But let's say they were conceived while their mother was a Goy, and they were born after their mother was Megayer. Again, they can't do chalitza or yibum. But in this case, if they are born b'kedusha, this is level 2, born when their mother was a yid, 2 lines on the bottom, there is an iser ishes ach. Simply put, because they're related through their mother, and therefore there's an iser of ishes ach, marry their brother's wife. On the case 3 is if after mommy is Megayer, she conceives and gives birth, then Arenki Yisrael L'chol Devreihem, they're full-fledged Yisraelim. So says the Gemara after quoting the Bryce on the last line, Katani Mios, what do we see? Ein Chayovim Mishameisesh Ach. We see that there's no Chiyov Ishesach. What does it mean there's no Chiyov? Did it say it's mutter? No. It said there's no Chiyov Ishesach. Chiyuv alaka, there's no chiyuv. As you turn over to today's Daf Sadi Chesam and Aleph, but the obvious implication is ha'yisuraika. So a clear raya like Rav Sheshes, as Rashi in the top line points out, it's a kasha on Rav Acha, that we see that there is some level relation, even though they were born, they were Megayer, we should think that they're not related. Seemingly on a Durabanan level, like Rashi hones in, they cannot marry the Ishezach. Answers the Gemara, there's no kasha. There's no iser. The seifa used the words chayiv, but you cannot bring me a raya from the words. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rava. There's a statement of Chazal that a Mitzri, an Egyptian, which really just refers to any non-Jew, any Goy, a non-Yid, has no father after he's Megayer. And it explains Rava, Baloi Tema, don't say that. What does this mean? Misham Dishtufe Bezima Dloyadi. Don't say that it's a practical issue. We don't know who the father is because the mother was a guy, because maybe she was sleeping with other men. So therefore, maybe that's the reason, because Gaimer Shtufe Bezima, they're steeped in immorality. Says Rava, that is not the reason. Avol Yadia. Even if we know really who the father is, still Chayshinan, still we would be, which would imply that if we do know who the father is, then Chayshinan, we would be concerned that what? This boy is related to his father. Says Rava, that is not the way to learn. Even if we know who the father is, we know which mitzvah, which guy it is. Why? From the brisa that we just quoted, because we saw the Shnei Achad Tu'umim, they were twins. What does it mean that they are twins? The Gemara knows the science. The Tiba Achasi, it's one. Tiba, it's the same. It's the same egg, of course. Well, here it's not really referring to the egg, it's referring to the father. So it's one drop of semen from the father that and was split into two. So even though we know it came bivadai from the same father, still, so what do we see? We see even though we know that these two boys, we have two brothers, and we know bivadai they came from the same father because they're twins, still the brisa did not allow Yibam. Why not? We know they're related through the father, and Yibam goes paternally. Yibam is only whenever there's relation through the father. So why not? Shemami no Avkuri Rachmana Chazal, the Torah was mafkir there lizare to their lineage. Chsev basar chamairim bisaram zer masus and zer masam ogzeres akosov, teaching us that it's not a knowledge problem. It's not that we don't know who the father is. We know who the father is. Still, we don't allow them to do yibum because la halacha midaraisa, we don't consider them to be related. Continues the Gemara Tashema, about 10 lines down. First word of the line is Susim. Continuing the discussion between Rav Shishas and Rav Acha. Tashema Dam Rav Yosi Maisa bin Nittayim. Beniftayim Hager, that was his name. Shenasa Ishes Achim Me'imai. He married the wife of his brother. Me'imai, he was a brother from the mother. There's no Ishus to Ger. Says the Gemara, ain't Ishus Leger. What do those words mean? Those words sound like a Ger can't get married. Interjects the Gemara, you telling me if a Ger gets married, there's no Kedushin? No, that's not what it means. There's no Isra of Ishas Hach. My laugh, says the Gemara. What are we referring to? That the brother got married when he was a ger, and yet we see that the gerus does do something like Rav Acha bar Yaakov, and it does not do something like Rav Acha bar Yaakov, that they're unrelated and therefore they can still marry the brother. Explains the Gemara, they got married when they were goyim. Says the Gemara, if they got married when they were goyim and then they were megayer afterwards, what's the chiddush? Of course they're unrelated. And that's a line we have to remember. That's going to be many of the answers of today's Gemara. They're going to say, no, the case is talking about that it was all when they were Goyim. If they were Goyim, it's Pasha that there's no relation. We would have a Havamina. There's a thought that perhaps it should be a Gezerah because one might make a mistake. Kamash Malan. No. Tashema, another raya, 20 lines down. First line is Tashema. Domer ben Yaisin. Ben Yaisin says, when I went overseas, I found the ger shenas ishes achamiyima. They married his brother of his. Married his brother. Didn't marry his brother. He married his brother's wife from his mother. Who allowed you to do this? He said to me, there's a woman who's Megayer, and there are 7 sons who also are Megayer, and each one went to marry each other just like I did. And what's his raya? Yoshav Rabbi Akiva, Asafsal Zeh, Yoshav Rabbi Akiva sat, V'amar Shnei Dvarim. There was another story just like me, and Rabbi Akiva was here, and he said, you know what he said? Ger noise ishes acha me'imai. The ger is allowed to marry the wife of his brother from his mother. V'amar. And then Rabbi Gamliel continued and said, he's repeating over the story, and we're going to see in a moment, the fact that he adds in the second detail is going to add to the veracity of his statement. Vayidvar Hashem el Yoina Sheinis, and it was that Hashem spoke to Yoina the second time. Leimar saying Sheinis Dibri Shchina Shlish is like Dimar Shchina, that the Shchina only spoke with Yoina 2 times and not 3 times. So what do we see from this? Bryce explains the Gemara Katani Miyos Ger Nois Eishes Achame Imai. We see a raya. We see a raya to Rav Acha bar Yaakov that a ger is allowed to marry his brother's wife. and he's not called related, and it's no problem. Says the Gemara, my love, did Nosva Echav Kshuger, and therefore we have a Raya. Says the Gemara, the same answer. Loi did Nosva Kshuakum. They got married when they were Goyim, and of course the same Kasha. My Lamemra. What's the Chiddush? Ma'u the Tema. I would have thought the Nigzer Kshuakum Hot Kshuger. Kamash Malon. That we don't make such a Gezira. Asks the Gemara. Umi Mehemen. Back in that story, there was this person Ben Yaisin, who listened to the Ger when the Ger said over what Rav Akiva said. Ask the Gemara, is this Ger believed to repeat what Rav Akiva said? We're about 15 lines of the wide lines. The first word of the line is Umi. If we have a Talmud Chacham that says over Halacha, Uba, and then what happens? And then he comes. If he said it before there was an actual story, but if we only hear the psak after we see the story, it doesn't have believability, there's no credibility, because maybe he's making it up. So says the Gemara, multiple terutim. Firstly, maybe he first said over the story. Firstly, said over the psak halacha. A second answer is because you remember the nitty gritty details. From the fact that he said there's a woman and 7 sons, and she was there. So we see that what he's saying is obviously true. A third answer, the fact that he said another item together with it, he said over that which Rav Akiva taught about Yaina, that itself adds credibility to that which he's saying. So 3 different answers why we're believing the eidos, the testimony of this ger with regard to the din of Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara now parenthetically just goes for a few moments into that brisa. 8 lines on the wide lines. The Shechina only spoke to Yonah 2 times, not 3 times. Asks the Gemara, what are you going to do with the pasuk that says, Hanavi? What are you going to do with the pasuk that seemingly points out that Hashem did speak to Yonah another time, which is a 3rd time? On the last narrow line, doesn't mean he spoke to Ninveh. It means he did not speak to Yaina about Ninveh anymore, but he still did speak to Yaina. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak on the first one like is another answer. Amar Hachi Kamar Kedvar Hashem Asher Diber Biyad Avdoya Navi Kishem Shenevach LeNinveh Meira LeToiva Kach Beirav Ben Yair Shenevach Lahem Yisrael Meira LeToiva. Says the Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak a different teretz. He didn't really speak to Yaina at all. The pasuk saying what Hashem said about Yaina, that just like they transformed Ninveh from bad to good, so to the times of Rebbe ben Yoyash, Klal Yisrael went from evil to good as well. And now we go back, Tashema, 3 lines on the bottom, again continuing the theme of the day, the Machlekes of Shishas of Achav bar Yaakov, with regard to this ger, whether he's allowed to marry his brother's wife, is there a relation and all? Tashema continues the Gemara, ger shayaleidasa b'kedusha, v'yirasa shalei b'kedusha. We have a ger that was born after his mother converted, but the conception, the mother conceived with a guy before she was megayer. Yesh loy she'er. Says the Brisa, 2 lines to the bottom, Yesh loy she'er ha'im. This son is considered to have relatives through his mother, ve'in loy she'er ha'av. But he's not considered to have relatives through the father. Ketzad. How is this so, says the Gemara? If he marries his sister through his mother, he has to get divorced, he has to leave her, because they're considered sisters. If he marries his sister through his father, he can stay married. Similarly, if he marries the sister of his father, he has to, through the mother, he has to leave. As we turn over, Tamar Beis Minav Yikayim, Ramir Chamar Mikayim Shay Ramir Oimer Koler Vashem Mishum She'er Ha'im Yoitzi, because related to the mother Mishum Av Yikayim Umoter Beishes Achem, and the Brisa continues that he's allowed to be together with his Ishes Achev, his brother's wife, and this, of course, is the detail that we need. Me'imai from his mother, Ubeishes Achi Aviv, and to be with his father's brother's wife. Eshar Kol Arayis Muteres Loi. La suye. What does this line come to include? Shar kol arayis. Eishes av, the wife of his father. Continues the braysa. Nasa isha ubita. If he married a woman and her daughter, he's allowed to stay married to one and he has to send the other one away. But initially he should not marry them. Meitha ishta, if his wife dies, mutar b'chamaisa, he's allowed to marry his mother-in-law. He's allowed to marry his mother-in-law. V'ikedematani, and there's some who learn that the end of the brisa reads asur b'chamaisa. So, okay, that was a very lengthy brisa, basically portraying this din that when there's a boy that his mother conceived was together with a guy while she herself was a gaita, and then was megayer and then gave birth. Hayrasa shalai bikdusha, conception as a guy, v'leidasa bikdusha. Says that this brisa, very many cases teaching us that this boy is related through the mother and not through the father. Explains the Gemara now the Raya to Rav Acha. 10 lines down, Katani Miyos, what do we see? Motor Beishes Achiv. The brisa said he's allowed to marry his brother's wife. My love, the nasa achav kishehu ger, is the case that talking about where his brother married her when he was already a ger, and yet the brisa is not worried that he's marrying his brother's wife. So seemingly this is a raya to Rav Acha again and a kasha to Rav Sheshes. Says the Gemara the same answer. Now, so we deflected the raya. Now, of course, parenthetically we delve into other cases in the braysa. Marmar Nasa Isha Obita. The braysa said if he marries a woman and her daughter, and then the braysa continued. This is quoting the braysa from a few lines from the top. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. The words themselves don't read. Are you telling me you have to get divorced? You can't stay married to the woman and her daughter? Do you have a thought you can marry lechatchila? Of course not. So what does the braysa mean? Stay married to one and divorce and get rid of the other. Lechatchila, don't do this. Of course not. Explains the Gemara. Some guy that's going back earlier on the braysa of Achikar. In all the cases that the Rabbanan said that you're allowed to stay married, still he should not have done it. Continues the Gemara, delving into different parts of the brayso. If his wife dies, let him marry his mother-in-law. What does Rabbi Yishmael hold? Rishmael holds the Isra of the mother-in-law is forever and ever, even after the wife dies. And therefore, since Rabbi Yishmael holds that the Isra mother-in-law applies even after Misa, there's a Gezerah by the Ger. On the Shari, Rabbi Kiva, Misa. Kalash le'Yisura, and therefore Gabi Ger le'Gazuba Rabbanon. And now we continue with a new Mishnah on the bottom of Sadi Chesem and Beis. And in all these Mishnayos, really, from here to the end of the parak for the next 2-3 days, is going to deal with very interesting cases of different children that we don't know. They got confused. And let's see, and we'll hopefully explain. 5 women that their children became mixed up. What does that mean? That means 5 women gave birth, primitive hospital, and they took the 5 baby boys and brought them to the nursery. And unfortunately, we don't know who is who. So now we have 5 boys from 5 mothers, and we don't know which mother is which, and these women have other children as well. So what happens? The mixture, these 5 boys grow up, and they all get married. Baruch Hashem, they're all nifter without any children. So now the question is, we have a shayla of yibum, chalitza. But their brothers, we don't know who are their brothers because we don't know who their mother is. So what do we do now? Says the Mishnah, not interesting, just one of these brain teasers. Arba, 4 of the brothers from 4 of the mothers, cholting du chalitza. Lachas to 1 boy. Ve'echad, and then the 5th brother, miyabe maisa, could do yibum to that boy. Because 4 of the brothers do chalitza to him, and that means we're for sure getting rid of any potential Isser. The 5th brother is now allowed to be with him in Manavshach. Either he's doing Yibum and it's a real Yibum, or he's doing nothing because already Chalitza was done. And then that brother and the three remainers do chalitza la'achatz to the other brother, to other son. It comes out that each of the women receive 4 chalitzos, and each one receives a yibum. Basically, we're hedging our bets over here, and we're ensuring that there's a potential, a suffix yibum that every single person could fulfill, and we're choosing this route over the vade chalitza. Meaning, what we could have done is we could have said all 5 other sons give chalitza and call it a day. But if that happens, then there's no potential that anyone did yibum. So we're choosing a route over here that maybe someone was mekayim the mitzvah of yibum. Says the Gemara, when we read the words in the Mishnah, it said they first do chalitza and then they do yibum. Says the Gemara, v'davka michlatz v'adu Yevumi. Al Yevumi b'rei shalai, but to do yibum right away, you're not allowed to. Why? The Kabbalah could be yam l'shuk. Because you might be marrying, you might not be the brother, and therefore you might be you might be marrying the Yevama while not being a brother. That's Isra of Yevama l'shuk. Says the Gemara, says the Gemara, 1 second. It said that the Mishnah says that the 3 brothers form chalitza. I don't understand. What's the reason that only 3 of them do it, and then one who marries them can marry the second one? Explains the Gemara. The Mishnah teaches you, so you should not say that one does yibum to all of them. Each one does a potential yibum to one. Why? As we explained, because maybe we're going with the suffix route. We rather have a potential over a vade not doing yibum. Continues the Gemara. Actually, we're going to call it a day over here, as the Gemara now is going to conclude with different variations of this case in the Mishnah. We'll pick it up from here in the next year. B'siyata d'shmayo.